moved into my house 5 years ago. The last 2 years, there have been strange things happening. It started in October 2004. I noticed strange footsteps, but soon shrugged them off, thinking there was probably an explanation for them. My 16-year-old son, Michael, slept in the only bedroom that was downstairs, while myself and his little sis have our own bedrooms upstairs. I would wake up in the morn with Michael sleeping on my bedroom floor. He, at first, heard strange noises. Then he sees shadows moving across his room. He came running from his room one day because his plug flew from the wall. Yet again, I put it down to electrical faults. He's felt something brushing him too. I've been with my partner, Mike, for a year now, and he's moved in with me in April. At first, Mike couldn't sleep with the noise of someone moving about up and down the stairs. Always checking, but nothing there. He would always say, "Did you hear that?" I was just used to hearing them. 4 months ago, Mike was sitting at the computer, which is besides Michael's bedroom door, and he jumped up with a pain. He lifted his shirt and there was a deep scratch on his stomach. There were no sharp instruments about, and there was no possible explanation for this. The computer always acts up for him, but no one else in the family. I am also catching shadows out the corner of my eye, and put it out of my imagination. We were lying in our bed 2 weeks ago watching telly. I lie nearest the doorway, and I see a flowing shadow going into my daughter's bedroom. Mike jumped up and shouted he saw it too. For once, I was completely freaked out. I had to sleep on the other side of the bed. Everything was forgotten, and then 2 days ago, Mike was sitting on the computer chair again, holding a piece of drawing paper on his lap. The paper hit him in the eye and took a chunk out of his cornea. He's in complete agony and has been attending hospital. He cannot explain how the paper hit his eye from the angle he was holding it on his lap, but knows that even if he tried to do it to himself it would be impossible. At first, I thought it was just a mischievous ghost of some kind, but now I'm starting to get very worried. With this thing assaulting my partner, it's no longer mischievous but evil. I wonder if it is the shadow that has always been with me, that I have always seen from the corner of my eye since, or is it something that was already in the house? 2 weeks ago, my son came screaming from the bathroom, saying he'd seen a face all bloody and wrapped in a dirty sheet. He killed himself last Friday, and we were all devastated beyond words. His note said, "I got it, Mom. Check the camera." There are no fish in Mirror Lake. They all died and washed up on its shores. The people in town won't believe me, but I saw them flood the beach. Their bodies were rounded up and eaten by the creatures in the woods. The few bones that were left were buried in the sand, but no one will come see them. The fisherman has lost interest in the lake long ago. No one comes to Mirror Lake anymore, except for us lonely few who live on its edge. The others that live on its shore say that the fish is still alive. But I know the truth. There are no fish in Mirror Lake. There is no life in Mirror Lake. Every ounce of living flesh tried to escape. The fish and the toads, the bottom dwellers and the reptilians. Everything that once tried to survive in Mirror Lake has failed. Now all that stays is the cold, dead plants and the rotting bodies of the deceased. If you speak to the others around the lake, they will tell you that the lake is filled with life. They say that the fish and toads are all around, that the bottom dwellers and reptilians are only hiding. But I know the truth. There is no life in Mirror Lake. There are no waves on Mirror Lake. Its water stays still through violent wind and pouring rain. A pebble can stir no ripple on its surface. A boulder would only sink calmly into its murky depths. People believe that its surface moves. The others on its edge say it moves as much as ever, but I have watched the water, and I know the truth. There are no waves on Mirror Lake. There are no reflections in Mirror Lake. There is only the opaque pitch on its surface. Your image will not show on Mirror Lake if you look from above. The many trees and few houses are not displayed on its still water. The people in the town do not dare look at the murky water in Mirror Lake, and the others that live on its edge say that they see the reflections on the surface line. I've stared into Mirror Lake for hours, and I know the truth. There are no reflections in Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake is dead. The water is deep and unmoving. Its life is all dried up. There is nothing left in Mirror Lake. But I still do not dare look out my window at it at night, for I might see something that stirs its water. I do not wish to see the thing that moves in Mirror Lake, because I know there are no fish in Mirror Lake. I'd like to start off by saying that I don't have a fucking clue why I'm posting this on X, or really at all. Maybe I'm afraid of dying or something. The events described in this story happened a month and a half ago in Shenandoah, West Virginia. Although I typed this up about 2 weeks ago, I haven't really had the guts to post until what happened yesterday. The story starts in late September, when my family went for a visit our relatives, who invited us to celebrate one of them, Desiree, getting like $2,000 in some scratch-off lottery thing. They live in this really fucking shitty part of Shenandoah that people from Charlestown, Shepherdtown, and Ransom, basically the least redneck part of West Virginia, like to call Squalor Holler. It's way up on the mountain, and exactly like how everyone pictures it when they hear about it. Nothing but ramshackle shacks, rusty-ass rebuilt trailers, everything fucking covered in decades-old Christmas decorations, because they're all too busy being smelly rednecks to ever clean up. Real deliverance shit, just no rivers or canoes. The relatives we were visiting are absolutely confirmed inbreeders. All cousins fucking each other. We don't refer to them as aunt, uncle, whatever. Just relatives. Not terrible people or anything, just absolutely cartoonish, depressing hillbilly stereotypes. So, anyway, we're up here in this godforsaken trailer. It sucks. There's like 8 of them, plus me, my dad, my mom, and my sister. About 2 hours in, my mom takes my cell phone so I can focus on family time together, which is bullshit. All we did the whole time was eat TV dinners and be forced to watch NASCAR and shit. After like 6 hours of this shit, about 10 minutes before we're supposed to leave, it starts raining. We know how treacherous the roads can get up the mountain, so we decide to wait for the rain to die down. Flash forward 2 hours later, it's fucking dark as hell. 10 o'clock and there's a flood warning for the area. I have my phone back by this time, no reception though, of course. I'm playing Tetris and Texas Hold'em and stuff when suddenly I hear my dad start losing his shit in the next room. I walk over, and it turns out that they'd let slip that they buried their kid, Thomas, outside, and apparently were afraid rain would wash up his body, or some other horse shit. The kid was like 6, he was attacked by a dog, and they never told the cops. Just fucking buried him like he was a family pet. My dad's flipping his shit, and rightfully so, because, you know, we live in the 21st century and all. So our relatives all say they'll sort it out in the morning. My parents tell me and my sister to stay in the same room as them during the night, and we do. None of us really suspected that they'd killed Thomas or anything, since they're really peaceful. They didn't even own any guns like an old-timey double-barrel shotgun they had on the mantle. Nevertheless, we were creeped the fuck out and intended to tell the cops in the morning once we got to town. So, it was like 3 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. Power had gone out for the 5th time or so, and I'm not able to charge my dead phone. Worst part is, I could see Thomas's little grave right outside the window, little cross on it and everything. I'd assumed the kid couldn't have been buried deep at all since they were so worried about him just washing up out of the grave. So I just fixated on it, kept being drawn to looking out the window, and then I saw the fucking worst thing in my life. Something was creeping through the trees toward the house. I stared at it for a while, but I couldn't get a good look at it since it was raining and the brush was so thick. For a few minutes, I assumed it was two really pale horses, kind of ambling through the woods side by side. Then it walked into the moonlight and I saw that it was all one thing. Like a kind of human torso but wider, it finally stepped into full view. And I saw it had some like 6 legs, kind of somewhere between a beetle's legs and a horse's legs. 2 arms, right where someone would normally have them. But they were about half a foot longer than a normal man's arms. It had a bald head, but the face looked like some sort of fucking bizarre masquerade ball kind of mask. This fucking clenched up, furrowed forehead and a nose that looked sort of like a crow or raven's beak. It didn't have eyes either. Just like the depressions where eyes would go. It looked like it had a human mouth underneath its proboscis. The thing moved sort of gracefully and made these soft thumping noises when it moved. It must have been like 7-8 feet tall, but it sounded like it weighed maybe only 150 pounds at most. It starts walking towards Thomas's grave, and then I finally snap out of whatever trance I was in and just scream. My mum was the first to wake up, and I tell her to look out the window. She rushes over and doesn't really seem to understand what she's looking at. After a minute though, the thing bends down and starts pawing at the grave with his hands. My dad and Jasper rush in, and Jasper just fucking loses his shit. He screams like a little girl, runs back out the room, yelling for his father, yelling, "It's outside! It came back and it's outside!" I look back and see the thing digging furiously at the ground, kicking up huge mounds of dirt. I hear these sounds of feet running around the house. I think they were looking for the shotgun. The thing reaches into the hole and grabs up what I assume was Thomas's body by the leg in one hand. The thing kind of gallops back into the woods, snapping all these branches and shit. And then that's when we hear it. A kid crying. The sound of a child sobbing and crying from the direction the thing took off in. We left as soon as the rain let up, at like 5 AM. I don't even think they told anyone at the house. Drove straight back to Ransom, only stopping for gas. No one said a word to each other. My family refuses to speak about what happened. I tried to bring it up once, just to make sure it was real. My dad told me to shut the fuck up, so I did. I typed this up about 3 weeks after it happened, but just saved it to a notepad file and left it alone. Never mentioned it to any of my friends or anything. Just tried to erase it from my mind by getting absolutely fucked up drunk whenever my thoughts lingered on it. It mostly worked, up until yesterday.
Continue.
This bound not end with a skeleton popping out, OP.
See, I work at this gas station in Ransom. From 8 PM to 3 AM, I work the register, keep the place clean, and take up the trash. Yesterday, when I was bringing the trash bags over to the back of the building for the dude in the morning to take care of, I heard what I'd assumed to be some junkie fucking around in the dumpster. I yelled at whoever it was a couple of times to get the hell out before I called the cops. But as I walked towards the source of the noise, I suddenly heard those same footsteps. That soft thump-thump, hooves or feet or whatever the hell they were. I turned right around and went back into the store and hid behind the counter. I look over at the outside security monitor to see some kind of movement just off screen. Something huge casting a shadow and moving, catch a glimpse of, I don't know, an elbow or something? A pale limb darting in and out of view. It had to have been the same thing. I waited for it to leave, and after a while, it did. I woke up behind the counter at 6 AM in the morning to my manager giving me this fucking look like I'm a drug addict or something. Went home, typed the rest of this up, and that's about it. He's come up to my room almost every night for years. He's about 6 feet tall if I had to guess. He's very old, at least 70. He's always heavily dressed in thick layers of clothing, making it difficult to guess his weight or body type. He be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure he is male. That's just a placeholder pronoun, I suppose. He's never gotten into my room, I'm sure of that. He's tried. Mostly just stands outside my room on the deck, pressed up against the glass windows of the double doors. You can get up on the deck directly from outside the staircase. I tried removing the steps last month. He didn't come up that night. The next morning, the mangled, flattened body of my 16-year-old cat had been shoved through the mail slot of the main entrance on the ground floor. I spent that day repairing the deck staircase. I used to not have curtains over the glass double doors. The first night he came, he was in full view. The lower half of his face was pressed against the glass, a thick hood covering his eyes. His mouth opened, and he started to lick the glass in a small circle, while his wrinkled hands rubbed against the door, creating a horrible squeaking sound. Immediately, I screamed. As I fumbled my phone to call the police, he slammed a fist on the door, turned around, and jumped over the deck railing. When the police arrived, I gave them my description and told them where he went. This all happened around 1 AM, as it has ever since. Now, my deck is about 3 stories off the ground, down a sheer cliff overlooking a field. While most people would probably survive the fall, they wouldn't do so without seriously fucking up something. You'd think an elderly man would break his legs, rendering him stationary. At the base of my deck, the police found 2 deep boot imprints, presumably where he fell. Leading off from the imprints was a clear trail where he'd gone through the tall grass. Shallow, alternating, left and right prints, led through the trail with a long stride. He hit the ground and sprinted, possibly uninjured. The police followed the trail into the woods at the edge of my property. About 50 feet in, there was a small makeshift camp. It had a brown pup tent, a small fire pit, and a pile of dead rodents. One rodent was skewered over the pit. I told the police I did not want this camp on my property, and it was taken down. Almost every night since, around 1 AM, he's there. If I call the police, he runs. I brought a shotgun, prepared to defend myself. I sat up, waiting. I've done this a few times, and when I do, he doesn't come. Not until I doze off. Then I wake to the squeaking sound of skin against glass. He makes sure I know he's still there. Then he runs. I only to prevent him getting up. Something of mine breaks the next morning. In case of my removal of the stairs, he killed my cat. Otherwise, he's always outside, standing on the deck, pressed against the glass. Bought some curtains and hung them over the doors. I never go out there anymore, and I never pull the curtains back. I only know he's still there because of the horrible squeaking sound. I tried to move out, trying to sell the house and leave. The morning after I posted the listing, a small note scrawled on birch bark was tossed in my mail slot. On it, the personal details of every member of my immediate family were listed. I pulled the house listing immediately. If I'm ever gone for more than a few days, I come back to broken windows, destroyed houseplants, and dug up yard. After a week-long vacation once, I came home to find all my goldfish fried in a pan on my stove. The police have tried to get me to move away. I don't think I can tell them about the note. I'm almost positive something bad will happen if I do. Ever since the stairs incident, he's gotten bolder. He's been in the house while I'm here, and I think he's always around, not just in the middle of the night anymore. I've caught glimpses of him. I always immediately run to my bedroom. I've heard him fiddle with the lock. I swear I've heard both doors to this room rattle simultaneously. He wants to get in here. For now, I think I'm safe. I have my shotgun in case he tries to attack. While I know he's gotten into my house, I'm sure he'll never get into my room. I've walled myself in. You see, Last time I left this house was when I fixed the outside stairs. I've since walled off the door to my bedroom, and the only way out is through the glass doors on the deck. I'll have to leave eventually, and I know he'll be waiting. If he isn't, then I can only pray for my family. I guess it all started a few years ago. I was a regular on a different site. I'd go there to troll mostly. I was a little younger and much less mature then. Anyways, after I'd been visiting this site for a while, I got into it with this girl, and I said some pretty mean things to her. She convinced me that I genuinely hurt her feelings. Well, I'd never met anyone harmed by my trolling, just did it to pass time. I didn't really have much of a life, to be honest. So I sent her a message to apologise. After that, we started sending the occasional message back and forth, and we began getting to know each other. Soon it was a message or two every day, and then not long after, we began chatting on a daily basis. I'd get back from work, go to my cramped little room, and immediately get on to see if Amanda, we'll call her Amanda, was on. I grew to really like her, and as crazy and stupid as it may sound to most people, I grew to love her. One thing I noticed early on though, she didn't take rejection very well, even though I would never have rejected her anyways. She often took it that it was as if I couldn't talk to her for some reason. During those times, she'd often lash out, chew me out, and then sign off. As our relationship grew though, so did her ability to trust and confide in me. She began telling me about her addictions. First, it was minor things, not even really bad in my opinion. She'd talk about how she'd smoke pot on the weekends and get blackout drunk. Later, she started talking about the pills she'd take when she was drunk. I worried a little more then, but I'd never been perfect either. I've experimented plenty of drugs before. Eventually, it got to the point that we'd talk about wanting to be with one another, about how we wanted to meet. At the time, the situation just wasn't right for either of us though. Between the distance, her not having a car, and me not having enough time off work, it just wasn't possible. When we'd say goodnight, she'd usually go on for another 10 minutes about how she was so sad and alone, and all she wanted was to be with me. I'd try to comfort her, but it never worked. Eventually, I decided it was only fair to her that we'd start talking to each other as just friends. I figured her feelings for me would eventually fade and she'd find someone local she could be happy with. She was very beautiful, so it wasn't as if she had to worry about attracting someone. She didn't take it very well. She told me she hated me, called me every name in the book. I didn't hear from her for a week after that. When she started talking to me again, she said she understood, and that she was sorry for saying she hated me. Needless to say, I was glad she'd forgiven me, and it put my mind at ease that she was able to understand, or so I thought. After that, she began talking about every guy she slept with, telling me details. I still had feelings for her, she knew I did. I told her to stop and she'd back off for a bit. But she'd always tell me about another one, and every once in a while she'd say, "It could be you." Our relationship continued to become more destructive. She began hurting herself. She'd send me pictures of the razor marks on her wrists, tell me about the needle she was sticking in her arm right where she'd fucked a total stranger. It was hard to deal with, but I did, because I blamed myself for not being able to make her happy. This went on for a while until the time came when I was to be deployed. I told her about it, and she seemed genuinely concerned. We told each other that we'd keep in touch, and for a while before I left, it was like it used to be. Then the day came, and I went away. Though I had an opportunity to get online, it wasn't often. Our communication became less and less frequent, until finally, I just stopped hearing from her altogether. A year went by. I'd think about her every once in a while, but not too often. When I'd gone back, I started frequenting the forums on that site again. I found out that Amanda had deleted her account and basically told everyone they'd never hear from her again. Eventually, everyone forgot about her, even me. Then, about 3 months ago, I got a private message from an unfamiliar screen name. She claimed to like some of my writing I'd posted on my profile. I thought that was strange because no one ever reads people's books there, and I never really thought my writing was any good. The way this person talked, I knew exactly who it was, so I called her on it. She confessed that it was her, Amanda. We sent a few messages back and forth. She was very different. She told me that after we'd stopped talking, she'd given up. I'd been her only happiness aside from drugs, and the only way she knew how to feel something without self-mutilation was to love me. She told me she'd only messaged me because she wanted to let me know she intended to take her own life. She didn't know anyone who'd care, and she at least hoped I'd care. I did. I tried to talk her out of it. Amanda told me if I really didn't want her to go through with it, I'd let her call me. She just wanted to hear my voice. So, I gave her my number. Moments later, I received a phone call from a blocked number. I knew it was her. I answered. "Hello? Amanda?" She replied. "Yes, it's me. No one has ever listened to me, but you did. You cared. You're the only one who ever has. But then you abandoned me, and I had no one. I just wanted to call you because I wanted you to know it's too late now. I wanted you to hear me say it, not just read it. You're going to listen now, and then you're going to truly learn how it felt for me, being invisible to everyone, not existing." Then all I heard was her sobbing. I tried to comfort her. I tried telling her I cared. She wouldn't listen. Then I heard a strange sound. A very low-pitched humming sound. It was a disturbing sound. It began to drown out her sobbing. And then her sobbing could no longer be heard at all. I don't know if it was too loud or if she just stopped. I listened to this strange, almost alien noise. Even as it sent a chill down my spine, I couldn't stop. And then the phone call ended. I tried messaging her several times a day. I never got a reply. A week went by and then it started. I received a phone call from a blocked number. I'd answer and it was always the same thing every time. That noise, that awful, twisted sound. It would go on for about a minute, and then the call would end. I could never manage to hang up for some reason. I assumed it was her and she was just messing with me, a ridiculous effort to get attention. Even believing that though, the noise still bothered me. Some nights after hearing that noise, I even began sleeping with the lights on. Silly, I know. After about a month of this, I received an anonymous email, just a bunch of random numbers. Usually, I wouldn't have even noticed such an email. There was no subject, no body, only an attachment. I scanned it for viruses, nothing. It was just a video. I clicked it open, and shortly after, the video began playing on my screen. At first, it was kind of dark and a bit blurry. I couldn't really make out much. I could tell there was a person though. The person began to light some candles, and as the room began to fill with an eerie light, the camera began to focus. I knew. It was her. She was sitting alone in her room with a phone in her hand. She picked up the phone and put it to her lips. "Yes, it's me. No one has ever listened." It was from the night we'd spoken. I continued watching, not remembering how the call had ended. Then she began to cry, and I heard that awful noise. My hair stood on end, and my hand began to tremble. What I saw next, if I could be rid of any memory, it would be those next few minutes. There are no words to describe it. The thing that made that noise. I sat there and watched as she committed in the most disturbing fashion I could ever imagine, staying on the phone till the very last moment. Then the screen became static and the video ended. I contemplated what I just saw. I was horrified. My mind raced. Who sent it to me? It obviously wasn't her. But who would film that? Who would take part in that? Stand by and watch that? And then send me the video? I'd never talked to her through email. How did they get my email? My thoughts were cut short though, as my phone began to ring. It was a blocked number. Hello? All I heard was that sickening noise. And then weeping. Her weeping. The sound faded a bit. I heard her voice. You'll be forgotten, just like me. People will stop noticing. They'll stop caring. Soon, all you'll have is me. You'll be mine again, forever. Then the noise picked up again for a few moments. The call ended. I know what I saw. She wasn't alive. She didn't have the money or the skills necessary to produce a video that real looking, unless it was real. She probably recorded that phone call before the video, I thought. Some sick bastard was responsible for all this. The calls, the anonymous email. I just wanted it to stop. But the phone calls didn't stop. Always the same. Except now I could hear her crying. And always she ended it by saying, "You'll be mine forever. Only I'll be able to see you." I began watching the video every day. The numbers in the email weren't random either. I'd realised it was a date. The date of that first phone call. It was about a month ago. I began to notice that people didn't seem to really pay much attention to me at work. They'd acknowledge me if I said something pertaining to the job, but then they'd always go right on with their business. It was as though all personal conversation had started coming to an end. Then, about a week ago, they stopped calling my name at formations. It was as if people were outright ignoring me, often looking right past me. If I said hello, even to a stranger, I wouldn't get a response. As I typed this, I've never felt so alone. I just wanted someone to know. None of you really seem to notice me either, but maybe one of you will read this. Maybe someone will care. I have to go now. The noise has started again. It's not on the phone anymore. It's in my room. As a kid, I used to love the sea. I could spend the whole day splashing in the water until I'd get cold. Sometimes, I'd even stay in the water so long that my parents would have to go and get me out of the water. Upon getting me out, they'd find my lips completely blue and my lower jaw shaking. But I still want to go back and swim and splash around in the water some more. I live about half an hour away from the sea. The beach is very crowded, of course, but that's the most popular beach. That's why nowadays, I don't go there anymore. A couple of years back, by dull luck, on another beach that is about an hour and a half long bus ride away from my place. I don't go there that often, but it sometimes feels very relaxing to go there. What makes it so perfect is that even on the most crowded days you won't see more than 10 people on the whole beach. Also, there's a small lighthouse that you can walk up to, which opens up a great sight of the sea. A year ago, right at the end of summer, I went there, just like I usually did, except at that time I'd fucked up my sleep regime, so I'd usually be waking up around 5 to 7 PM, so when I went to the beach it was already a bit late. But the sun was still shining, since it was summer and the weather was nice, so I had no excuse not to go. After arriving and taking my time swimming, I got hungry. I had some snacks and some beer with me, so I just took a stroll to the lighthouse and made myself a small picnic. It took about 20 minutes to arrive to the small lighthouse. The sun had started to set in, but it was still quite bright. Also, the fact that no one else was around was quite nice. So I just settled in and enjoyed the view whilst having my small picnic. Time flew by quite quickly. I haven't even noticed how the sun had almost gone away, as as I was just sitting and daydreaming, instead of actually finishing my food and beer. After the sun completely set, a small storm came out of nowhere. Dark clouds, strong wind, and heavy rain started to pour out. The only way for me to try and avoid getting completely drenched is to stand close to the lighthouse on the opposite from which the wind was blowing. So I had to stand there, slowly getting soaking wet, to try and wait until this heavy rain stops pouring. All I did was just stand and watch far away into the sea and slowly drink my beer. After about 5 minutes, which felt like half an hour, I noticed something in the distance. Something was splashing in the sea. First I thought it was just some floating junk that some assholes just threw into the sea. But after a while, the object moved a bit closer, and upon properly fixating my sight on it, I got shocked and panicked. It seemed like the upper half of a person was stuck in the middle of the sea. I didn't know what to do. I panicked and started to think about what I could actually do. The person was too far away for me to just try and jump into the water and try and swim to them to try and save them. The weather also didn't help. I couldn't call for anyone for help because I didn't have a cell phone with me that time. I was thinking of a logical solution for this situation, but I just couldn't come up with anything. At some point I got control of myself and looked for that person in the sea again. There was no one in the water anymore. At that point I started to panic even harder. I thought of rushing back to the nearest house and calling for help. I took a quick look back in the water and saw that person even closer to me than before. This time I could see them waving. At that point I thought the person was waving for help. At that point I was convinced that I should rush back to the nearest house or nearest person I could find and ask them for help. But as I was about to, just after taking a few steps backwards, I started to hear a sweet melody in my ears, which momentarily calmed me down. All of a sudden, all worries left my mind and my body felt as if it was floating. I was conscious of everything I could hear, feel, and see, but I wasn't able to control myself, nor was I thinking about doing anything to gain back control. All I did was just stand there, soaking in the rain, listening to a very sweet melody that a female voice was humming. Slowly, my body turned around on its own. Once again, I was facing the sea. My eyes momentarily got fixated on the person in the sea, who once again got closer to me. The person was quite close this time, enough for me to tell it was female. I had no idea why, but all of a sudden my heart felt strange, as if I'd suddenly fallen in love, as if I'd found happiness in my life. The female was waving at me, as if calling me closer to her. Strangely enough, my body and my mind wanted to just go straight to her. So I started walking whilst listening to that sweet, sweet humming melody the female was humming for me. The female also was moving towards me, little by little. Upon her coming closer, I started to notice smaller detail. Her face was very pale and her arms were quite slim. She was very mesmerizing, so much that I couldn't look away from her, not one bit. At some point, I felt my heart starting to race like crazy. She had completely enraptured me. All I could do was slowly move towards her and listen to her humming melody. But as fate had had it for me, I'd slipped and I'd fallen very hard against the rocky pavement, so hard that I even got knocked out for a little bit. After waking up, the first thing I noticed is that the weather had started to calm down. Then I remembered why I was in such a position, so I quickly lifted myself up and started to look into the sea. There was nobody there. In any case, upon looking around and confirming that there was no one in the water, I started to realise that I've gotten quite wet and was starting to feel really cold. So I hurriedly started to walk back to the bus stop and went back home. After arriving home, except for the headache and the obvious cold that I had gotten, I started to feel an uneasiness in my chest, which afterwards started to feel like pain, also accompanied by weird dreams and hallucinations. Sometimes, I would go to that beach, even in winter, without even noticing it myself, as if I was just sleepwalking to there and suddenly waking up halfway there. And even though I feel a bit uneasy every time I catch myself going there unconsciously, I feel very relaxed and at ease every time when I arrive there, as if someone's waiting there for me. recently moved into a new apartment, and having very little money, had to settle for the only habitable place in a row of almost derelict buildings. The street was all but abandoned, but I'm pretty sure there were squatters 2 doors down. My building was the only one not boarded up, and compared to the others, it had potential. There was no electricity when I moved in, no curtains and no carpet. But at least the water was running. It was a particularly tough time in my life, which I won't go into, and I was grateful for a fresh start. I could really make a go of it here once I got some furniture in. The first night, I decided to sleep there, even without a mattress and only a few candles to find my way around, although I could probably have found the bathroom by smell alone. After setting up camp in what I suppose was the living room, I tucked into a gourmet meal consisting of cold beans and dry crackers, promising myself that once the sun came up, things would seem more homely and I could start unpacking. After exploring the shelves and cupboards of treasure, and finding only a handful of those plastic curtain pegs and a shoebox full of old rent books, presumably left behind by the landlord, I decided to perch myself in a corner and use my jacket as a makeshift bed, trying to sleep hunched over with nothing to look at but a bare, pitch-black window wasn't easy, and the thought of what must be lurking out there on the old industrial estate kept my attention firmly on that window the entire night. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much, and I decided to look around some more. I found a box of old sepia photos in the fireplace, each with 6 people standing at the same window, mouths open, and a pale shape in the reflection that I couldn't quite make out. I decided to take my mind off it, since these old photos give me the creeps anyway. By the second night, I was starting to feel more comfortable in the old place, and although most of my stuff was still in boxes, and I still had no furniture, carpets, or curtains, the daylight had given me a chance to explore properly. I spent most of my time planning how it would eventually look. I even nailed that old blanket over that window to keep any prying eyes out and to stop my imagination running wild. By candlelight, I occupied myself by reading the faint scrawlings in the old rent books I found, since it was the only form of entertainment available. But what I found was quite interesting. Dating back around 5 years, were 6 books in total, one for each tenant, and in every one just a single entry, rent and bond paid for 1 month, then nothing but blank pages. Something wasn't right. All 6 previous tenants stayed only a month or less. Feeling somewhat creeped out, I decided to take a piss before my last candle disappeared completely, and made my way across the hall to that awful bathroom, watching my shadow keenly dance across the peeling walls ahead of me until we met again at a heavy wooden door. I covered my mouth and walked in. The stench was so thick I could taste it, and as I unzipped my pants, the last candle went out. Now, to this day, I'm not sure where I pissed exactly, but I can tell you it was the fastest piss I've ever taken. Not only was I in pitch darkness, but I could only hold my breath for so long. I ran out there as fast as I could, but where was I running to? The realization came that I had no candles left, and with it, a thick blackness enveloped the walls, and the once flickering glow of the apartment had abandoned me. The hollow creak of the floorboards began to sound like whispers, and the peeling damp on every surface felt alive to the touch as I blindly ran my hand along the walls. Feeling a familiar bump, I pushed open the living room door and made my way carefully towards the window. Maybe a streetlight or passing car would light the room. If I could just remove the blanket I nailed up earlier. That window, which had made me so uncomfortable, was now my only hope for light. Reaching my hand through the darkness to pull the blanket away, I felt only a cold pane of glass. The blanket was gone. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it. On the other side of the bare black window, something pale and silent, its mouth open, waiting for my next move.